Amanda. You might be wondering why I'm wearing antlers today, and that would be because we are going to be talking about Santa Claus and his reindeer. This video is meant to be a video for mamas to watch. It's going to be a frank conversation about Santa Claus, if you know what I mean. So if you have kids in the house, prepare accordingly. So anyway, I just wanted to have another Let's Talk video. I haven't done one of those in a while. And I had a really interesting conversation with a friend on Facebook the other day that really actually sparked a big long conversation with Bill and I about Santa Claus and basically how we want to go about the whole Santa Claus thing with our kids. Since Alex is now, he's a little bit shy of 2, so he doesn't quite know what's going on yet. He's like a little more aware of Christmas this year. Like he knows he can say Christmas lights and Christmas tree and Santa, like he can say those words, but he doesn't really know what all that means. But next year is probably the first year he'll be almost 3. And so at that point, he's probably going to know what's going on a lot more. Honestly, guys, like I have had this dilemma about it. It's actually a dilemma that I have had since before I had kids even. Basically, my dilemma is, first of all, the whole lying to your kids thing. I'm not quite sure, you know, I've had some trepidation in how I feel. I mean, I know it's like a white lie and everything, but just, you know, I'm all about, you know, I think honesty is the best policy. So that's the first thing. And then the other thing is I have trouble with materialism. There's just so much materialism that is surrounding the whole Santa story, and that has always really bothered me. And it really got me thinking about it again when my friend made this post on Facebook. It was an article that she had read talking about, it was actually a blog post that somebody had written. Anyway, so this lady's son said, "Mommy, if there really was a naughty and a nice list, wouldn't everybody be on the naughty list?" And what a perceptive little kid, you know? And he's right. None of us are perfect. And that also got me thinking about another aspect of it that I am not so keen on, is this idea that if you have good behavior, you get things, you know, feeding into the whole trouble that I have with the materialism problem. Anyway, so I've really been having an internal battle about this because, like, I don't want to be a party pooper, you know. My family did the whole Santa tradition thing when I was a kid. Although, let me tell you that I figured out that Santa wasn't real when I was 4 or 5 years old. Yeah. The reason was my mom has extremely distinctive handwriting. And I remember getting this present that said, "To Amanda from Santa and his elves." And I said, "But Mommy, this is your handwriting." and I just remember just like realizing what was going on at that early age, you know. And I never felt like it was that big of a deal. Like I didn't feel like at least I don't remember feeling like my whole world was shattered or anything. My parents didn't like make a huge ordeal out of the whole Santa thing. You know, it was just kind of like a wink and nod kind of thing. You know, it was definitely a fun thing. Like I loved the Santa story, even though I knew as an older child that it wasn't real. It was kind of fun to just kind of play along with it, you know, and just like go there in my imagination, imagining, well, what if it was real, you know? And, but anyway, so I don't feel like I had any adverse effects from it when I was a kid. Anyway, and this started this whole conversation between Bill and I. And so I told Bill, I was like, you know, I am really having this internal struggle about what we should tell our kids about Santa Claus. Like, I'm really struggling with this. Like, I know it's not a struggle for probably most parents. It's probably just like, oh, it's a fun thing to do or whatever. But like, just like really having this battle in myself about it, you know? It's like, I really don't want to be the party pooper mom, you know, the Debbie Downer or whatever, and like, or like the mom in Miracle on 34th Street or whatever, you know. It can definitely be fun to do some of those traditions, but like at the same time, like I also really want my kids to have a really good grounding in reality. And and just the whole, lying to them thing, everything that I just said, materialism. And Bill was like, well, I feel really differently about this. Like, he was saying that he really thinks that, like, the fantasy life of children is a really, like, healthy and important part of childhood. And, just the imagination and that magic of, fairy tales and things like that when you're a kid, and just imagining the possibility, oh, what if it is real, that there is a real magic and innocence to that. He said, I feel like it's really important for us as parents to help foster that, because, they're going to have their little fall from innocence soon enough as it is. And, I was thinking about that, and, the more I thought about it, like, I think he's right. Have you guys ever seen the movie Big Fish? It came out, like, I don't know, 10 years ago or something like that. And Bill and I actually watched it again last year together, and it's kind of about that whole concept, that there is value in stories and tall tales and parables, that really you can often get, like, deeper meaning and lessons out of, fantastical kinds of stories, and kind of like a magical realism, telling stories in that way that it's a lot richer that way. Sometimes you can, like, understand things about life a lot better by hearing or reading a story. It can be a fictional, fantastical story. You can get a lot more meaning out of that. I mean, I was thinking about how, Jesus taught so many of his lessons in parables, right? And it's because sometimes, like, that can portray a message so much more clearly and in so much more depth. And sometimes, just like as a kid, having that cross between, the fantasy and the reality, there's just kind of a blurred line there. That's just an integral part of childhood, that magic, And the more Bill and I were talking about this, I was like, I really think you're right. I did experience that as a child, that magic as a child, even if it wasn't so much with Santa Claus. We did the whole, like, tooth fairy thing, and, leprechauns on St. Patrick's Day, and, just fun things like that. And I remember, watching movies like The Secret Garden when I was a kid, and just, like, getting totally absorbed into that world, and, like, just imagining myself being there, and just, like, imagining, oh, what if this is real? What if there really was this, like, hidden secret garden that had this magic to it, or what was that other movie that came out when I was a kid? It was like a fairy tale or something like that. It was about these little girls that, like, photographed fairies, and it was, like, showing, like, oh, fairies are real, and there's just, like, this whole magic to it. And I remember just thinking that as a kid, like, oh, that's so cool. What if fairies are real? That's just so magical, So yeah, and just thinking about, like, how kids have such imaginative play. Even, they don't even need to be told stories. Like, they just go into that fantasy world when they play without even having to be told a story, So kids just naturally have a knack for that, and they just, it just seems really natural, And the more Bill and I talked about that, I was like, yes, I really think that that is true. It really is an important part of childhood. And so I think having that conversation really helped me come around to feeling more comfortable, I think, with doing the whole Santa thing with our kids. But that said, I still do take some issue with how much, especially in American culture, how much materialism does surround Christmas. And that is a real ethical problem that I have with it. And I still feel like that's something that needs to be addressed. This was part of the conversation that I had with my friend, that if you're a Christian family, I think kids often end up confusing Santa Claus and God, right? And thinking that God is just like Santa Claus, and if you're really good, then you can earn God's favor and God will give us things, right? And there is a problem with that way of thinking. because, you know, in the Christian faith, like, that is not how God operates. God operates through grace, which means that, you know, like the little kid in that blog post observed, like if there was a naughty and a nice list, like all of us would be on the naughty list and the nice list, right? Because none of us are perfect, and no kid is perfect, no adult is perfect, and there is nothing that we can do, you know, to earn God's favor. It's not the way God operates. We don't say prayers and bam, God gives us exactly what we want. Or say a prayer like, oh God, if I do this for you, will you do this for me? It's not, you know, our relationship with God is not like a, if I scratch your back, you'll scratch mine kind of relationship. And that is the whole point of Christianity, is that God's love is unconditional, regardless of the fact that we are completely imperfect human beings, right? And so I think that that really got me thinking that I really want to be careful in making sure that I help my kids understand the distinction between Santa Claus and God, right, and Jesus, because they are not one and the same. And it really helped me come to the conclusion that, like, while we will do the whole Santa Claus thing with our kids, you know, and we'll make it fun and everything, but we won't make that like the main emphasis of Christmas. We'll emphasize that the true meaning of Christmas is about Jesus' birth, and talking about just the message of Jesus. The main reason that he came was to give that message. Even though we are completely imperfect human beings, it doesn't matter. Because God gives us grace, God loves us unconditionally, regardless of how good or bad our behavior is. Granted, I could have a whole philosophical conversation about how people have the criticism, oh, like, well, then the frozen chosen, if you believe, then you are in, kind of thing, and how, like, what you do doesn't matter. And that's not true either. I really believe that, you know, when you have God in your life, good comes out of you in the way that you live your life. And, you know, the more you seek God, the more your character becomes like the character of God, in that you are more and more capable of loving others unconditionally and giving grace to others, that kind of thing. And I really believe that God uses us to provide for the needs in the world. And we have to act to do those things, right? So it's not like if you believe you're scot-free, right? Anyway, but that's a whole philosophical conversation for another day. Anyway, so it just brings it back to Bill and I both want to teach that philosophy to our kids. And that, you know, we really don't want them to confuse Santa and Jesus and God or whatever. So really the conclusion we came to is that what we want to do is teach our kids Santa is fun, but Jesus is important. And there's a difference between them. And, you know, when the time comes when they start to doubt about the whole Santa thing too, like, we'll just have a conversation about it. Bill had an excellent response. You know, he said, like, when our kids say, is Santa real? Then we simply say, well, what do you think? And just start a conversation that way. And, you know, if they figure it out, then we'll talk about also, like, well, who, you know, St. Nicholas really was a real character in history. He was a saint in the Catholic Church, and he actually was doing God's work. He really was embodying the spirit of Christmas, so to speak, in that he was very generous. He devoted his life to feeding the hungry and clothing the poor. And, like, that's what God wants us to do with our lives, right? And so anyway, so just making that transition and talking about how, oh, Saint Nick really was a real person who actually did godly things, and, you know, just talking about it that way. And also just how even if, you know, Santa Claus in the form of the the big old man with a white beard who lives in the North Pole and flies around, you know, in one night with reindeer, that even if that whole part isn't literally real, it's still, you know, we can still talk about how it's a story. And even though, like, all of the fairy tales we read, even though they're not real, there's still a kernel of truth to them and a lesson to be learned from them. And I think that's true of the Santa Claus story too. And we can, once the kids figure it out, we can talk about it in that way and say, Santa Claus is a symbol of the meaning of Christmas, which is not materialism, mind you. You know, the idea that he brings gifts is a symbol. It doesn't necessarily mean it's literal, but it's just a symbol for generosity, and that is really what we really want to be embodying around Christmas time, right? Is giving and generosity, and we can really learn that from the Santa Claus story. Anyway, I just wanted to just put that out there and just have this little discussion about how we're thinking we're going to go about the whole Santa Claus thing with our kids, since I feel like it's encroaching. I feel like this is the last year I don't have to worry about it, and next year I'm like, oh, we're gonna have to start jumping into this tradition. Let's have a conversation about it, you guys. Like, tell me in the comments below, those of you who have kids or one day want to have kids, or wherever you are in life, or even how your Santa experience was as a kid. Tell me about it. Like, what is it that you tell your kids? What was it that your parents told you? And how is it that you want to broach that topic with your kids? I'm really curious, because I do know there are some families that choose not to do the whole Santa Claus thing too, for a lot of the same reasons I was talking about. And, you know, obviously there are a lot of people who do it, you know, and just think it's innocent fun and everything. So anyway, let's have a conversation about it, you guys. Tell me in the comments below, what do you guys think? I would love to hear your thoughts. Anyway, that's it, and hope you guys enjoyed this conversation, and we'll see you in my next video. Bye guys.